Every summoner in the academy got a dragon, a phoenix, or a legendary beast. He got a slime the size of a tennis ball, and the entire hall laughed for 3 straight minutes. His name is Yoon Seojin. In a world where summoners bond with magical creatures at age 16, your familiar defines your rank, your career, and your entire future. S-rank familiars like dragons and phoenixes mean a life of glory and unlimited funding. A-rank familiars like griffins and thunderwolves mean solid career, decent pay, respect. And then there's F-rank, the rank reserved for creatures so weak that the summoner registry doesn't bother recording them. Slimes, common bugs, decorative fish, things that exist to be eaten by real familiars. Yoon Seojin's summoning circle produced a translucent blue blob that fit in his palm. It jiggled once, blinked to tiny dot eyes at him, and made a sound like a wet hiccup. The entire summoning hall erupted in laughter. Instructor Kang covered his mouth but couldn't hide the cringe. The academy's golden boy, Choi Tae-yun, leaned back with his S-rank flame lion at his side, and said loud enough for every student to hear, "Congratulations, you summoned dinner." The laughter doubled. Seojin stood there holding his slime while 100 classmates treated him like a punchline. He looked down at the little creature trembling in his hands. It was scared. He could feel that through the bond, genuine fear from a living thing. Not fear of him. Fear of the noise, the mocking, the overwhelming hostility directed at something tiny and soft. Seojin closed his hands gently around it and walked out without saying a word. Behind him, the laughter continued. But inside his chest, something had already started changing. Not anger exactly, something quieter and more dangerous. Determination. He named the slime Ori, not after anything meaningful. It was just the sound Ori made when it was happy. A soft, round little Ori that Seojin found ridiculously endearing despite everything. The Academy's familiar training program was designed for creatures with combat potential. Attack drills, defense formations, elemental channeling exercises. Ori couldn't do any of it. When Seojin brought Ori to the training grounds, the instructor told him to sit on the bench. "There's nothing I can teach a slime," the man said, not unkindly, but absolutely hopelessly. So Seojin trained Ori himself. In his dorm room, after classes, late into the night. He started with the basics: movement, response to commands, simple absorption exercises. Slimes could absorb small amounts of material into their bodies and break it down. That was their only natural ability, and the academy considered it useless. Seojin didn't think it was useless. He thought nobody had ever bothered to find out what happened when you push it further. The first breakthrough came 3 weeks in. Seojin fed Ori a piece of broken iron from a discarded practice sword. Ori absorbed it slowly, the metal dissolving into its translucent body over several minutes. Then something happened that made Seojin drop his textbook. Ori's surface hardened. The soft, squishy membrane turned rigid, metallic, reflecting light like polished steel. For about 30 seconds, Ori was essentially a ball of living iron. Then the effect faded and Ori went back to being a regular slime, looking slightly pleased. Seojin stared at his familiar with new eyes. Ori didn't just absorb materials. It temporarily gained their properties. Feed it iron, it becomes iron. What happens if you feed it something stronger? He spent the next month testing this systematically. Wood made Ori flexible and lightweight. Stone made it dense and nearly impossible to move. Glass made it transparent and razor-sharp on the edges. And when Seojin managed to get a chip of monocrystal from the Academy's disposal bin, Ori absorbed it and glowed with raw magical energy for almost a full minute. During those 2 minutes, Ori could discharge small bursts of unfocused mana. Not powerful, not controlled, but real magical output from a creature ranked F. Seojin wrote everything down in a notebook he kept hidden under his mattress. Because if the Academy knew what Ori could do, they'd take it away and study it. Or worse, hand it to someone more prestigious who would use it as a research project. Seojin had seen how the Academy treated useful things discovered by unimportant people. They took the discovery and erased the discoverer. So he kept quiet and kept training. The second breakthrough was accidental and nearly destroyed his dorm room. Seojin dropped a vial of fire salamander blood during a late-night experiment. Ori, being a slime with no concept of danger, immediately absorbed it. The little blob turned bright orange, doubled in size, and shot a jet of flame at the ceiling. Seojin dove behind his desk as his curtains caught fire. By the time he smothered the flames with a blanket, Ori had returned to normal size, looking extremely satisfied with itself. Ori could absorb biological material too, not just gain physical properties, but temporarily acquire the abilities of living creatures. Salamander blood gave it fire. What would dragon blood give it? That question kept Seojin awake for 3 nights straight. He didn't have access to dragon blood, obviously. But the Academy's dungeon training program used monster remains as educational materials. and some of those remains still contained residual essence from powerful creatures. Seojin started volunteering for dungeon cleanup duty, the job nobody wanted because it meant hauling monster corpses in the dark. Perfect for a boy who needed access to rare biological material without raising questions. Over 3 months, he collected samples from dozens of defeated monsters, feeding each one to Ori and documenting the results with obsessive precision. Thunderwolf gave Ori electrical discharge capability. Stone Golem fragments gave it near indestructible defense. Shadow Bat wings gave it the ability to flatten and glide short distances. Poison Vine sap gave it a corrosive surface that dissolved anything it touched. And a single feather from a wind hawk gave Ori something nobody expected. Flight? Not hovering, actual flight. A slime the size of a tennis ball, soaring around his dorm room at impressive speed, bouncing off walls and making excited Ori noises. Seojin watched his F-rank familiar zip past his head and felt a grin crack across his face. You're not useless at all, are you? Ori landed on his head and jiggled happily. The third breakthrough changed everything. Seojin discovered that when Ori absorbed multiple materials simultaneously, it didn't just gain each property individually, it fused them. Iron plus fire salamander blood created a living ball of molten metal. Stone plus thunderwolf fur produced an electrically charged boulder that shocked on contact. Windhawk feather plus shadow bat wing created a flying shadow that could turn invisible. The combinations were nearly infinite, and each fusion was stronger than the sum of its parts. Ori wasn't just an absorption slime. It was an evolution engine, a creature that could become anything depending on what you fed it. The Academy ranked it F because it started as nothing. But nothing is also the ultimate blank canvas, and Seojin had just figured out how to paint. The first public test of Ori's power came during the midterm familiar combat exam. Seojin was paired against a C-rank summoner named Park Ji-hoon with the Rock Armadillo. The Rock Armadillo was the size of a large dog, covered in stone plates, slow but tanky. The instructor announced the match with visible apathy. This would be a quick loss for the slime kid, barely worth recording. Seojin set Ori down on the arena floor and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small vial of Thunderwolf essence he'd been saving for exactly this moment. Ori absorbed it instantly, its body crackling with blue-white sparks. Then Seojin dropped a chip of iron onto Ori's membrane. Fusion activated. Ori's body hardened into a sphere of electrified steel, sparks arcing across its surface. The arena fell quiet. The Rock Armadillo charged. Ori launched itself like a cannonball, trailing lightning. It hit the armadillo's stone shell with a crack that echoed off the arena walls. The shell fractured and the armadillo flipped backward, landing hard. Not knocked out, rock armadillos were tough, but visibly stunned. The electric current from the impact traveled through the cracks in its armor. The armadillo's muscles seized and it collapsed sideways, twitching. Match over in 7 seconds. Park Ji-hoon's mouth was hanging open. The instructor's clipboard slipped from his fingers. And across the arena, Choi Tae-yeon's flame lion shifted uncomfortably. Even an S-rank beast could tell when something in the room had changed. Ori bounced back to Seojin's hand, back to its normal blue translucent form. Making happy Ori sounds like it had just played a fun game. The instructor recovered first. That slime just used a compound elemental attack. How is that possible for an F-rank familiar? Seojin picked up Ori and cradled it against his chest. I trained hard, he said, which was true, but roughly 1% of the actual answer. After the match, 3 things happened very quickly. First, the Academy's research division requested Seojin bring Ori for examination. He declined politely and cited familiar bond protection laws. Second, Choi Tae-yeon cornered him in the hallway with his flame lion growling at his side. Lucky shot, Tae-yeon said, but his eyes told a different story. They told the story of someone who had never been surprised in his life, and didn't like the feeling at all. Third, a girl named Han Yuri, the Academy's top-ranked healer summoner, found him at dinner. She sat down across from him, without asking, and stared at Ori sitting on the table. That's not a normal slime, she said. No, Seojin agreed. Does it eat everything? Pretty much. Even healing herbs? Seojin paused. He hadn't tried healing herbs. That night, Yuri brought him a bundle of moonlight sage from the medical wing. Ori absorbed it, and its body turned to soft silver white. Then it pulsed once, and a wave of gentle healing energy radiated outward. A cut on Seojin's finger from that afternoon sealed shut into seconds. A bruise on Yuri's arm from training faded to nothing. Even the scratch table surface smoothed slightly. Yuri sat back in her chair, and her expression shifted from curious to reverent. A slime that can heal. She reached out and gently poked Ori. Ori made an Ori sound and nuzzled her finger. I want in on whatever you're doing, Yuri said. And just like that, Seojin's team of 1 became 2. The partnership proved critical because Yuri brought something Seojin didn't have. access to the Academy's restricted materials archive. As the top healer summoner, she had clearance for rare biological samples. Samples that would have taken Seojin months of dungeon cleanup shifts to gather. Over the next 2 months, they tested over 60 new materials. Phoenix Ash gave Ori regeneration. It could reform after being splattered. Kraken Ink gave it fluid manipulation, controlling water in a 20-meter radius. Basilisk Scale gave it a petrification touch that froze targets in stone for 3 seconds. And Dragon Heartblood, just a single drop that Yuri smuggled from the restricted vault, gave Ori something that made both of them sit in stunned silence for 5 minutes. It grew. Not temporarily, permanently. From tennis ball to soccer ball, and it didn't shrink back. The Dragon Blood had triggered a permanent evolution. Ori's base form was now larger, denser, and its absorption capacity had roughly tripled. The system panel that Seojin had never mentioned to anyone flickered in his vision. Familiar Evolution Stage 1 complete. Current rank reclassification D. From F to D, and for months through nothing but feeding it the right things. And D was just the beginning. The system showed 5 evolution stages, each requiring specific rare materials. Stage 2 needed essence from an A rank or higher creature. Stage 3 needed something called a dimensional core fragment. Stages 4 and 5 were locked behind question marks that made Seojin's stomach tighten. But the trajectory was clear. Ori wasn't just catching up to the other familiars. It was on a path to surpass every single one of them, including Taehyun's S-rank Flame Lion. The Academy's end-of-term tournament was where everything came to a head. 6-4 summoners in a single elimination bracket, familiars fighting alongside their masters. Seojin entered as the lowest seed, because his official rank was still listed as F. Nobody had bothered to update it. First round, Seojin's opponent was a Wind Summoner with a Razor Hawk. Ori absorbed Wind Hawk Feather plus Iron, launched itself as a spinning metal disc, cut through the Razor Hawk's wind barrier, and knocked it unconscious in 4 seconds. Second round, an Earth Summoner with Twin Stonehounds. Ori absorbed Basilisk Scale and petrified both hounds simultaneously with a single touch. Third round, a Water Summoner with a Tide Serpent 3 meters long. Ori absorbed Kraken Ink and turned the serpent's own water attacks back on it. The serpent essentially drowned in its own element. Fourth round, the whispers had already started spreading through the spectator stands. That slime isn't normal. Did you see what it did to the Stonehounds? Fifth round, Seojin faced an A-rank summoner for the first time. A girl named Mansira with a Jade Armor Manus, fastest reflexes in the bracket. The Manus struck first, blades flashing at speeds that blurred. Ori absorbed Phoenix Ash and reformed instantly every time a blade passed through it. The Manus couldn't damage something that regenerated faster than it could cut. Then Ori fused Iron with Thunderwolf Essence and counterattacked. The electrified Iron Sphere hit the Manus's Jade Shell and cracked it down the center. Sierra recalled her familiar before it took permanent damage, conceding the match. She walked past Seojin on her way out and paused. What rank is that thing actually? Still officially F, Seojin replied. She shook her head and kept walking. The semifinal put Seojin against Taehyun's closest ally, Kwandaeho. S-rank familiar, a Frost Titan bear that could freeze the arena floor solid. This was the match everyone expected to end Seojin's run. An F-rank slime against an S-rank bear. The power gap should be insurmountable. Daeho entered the arena confident, his bear radiating cold that made breath visible. Seojin reached into his jacket and pulled out 2 vials. Fire Salamander Blood and Phoenix Ash. Ori absorbed both simultaneously. Fusion activated and Ori transformed into a sphere of regenerating fire. A living fireball that couldn't be extinguished because it reformed from ash instantly. The Frost Titan bear charged and Ori met it head-on. Ice met fire, and the arena filled with steam so thick nobody could see. When it cleared, the bear was on its side for singed, ice armor melted, and Ori was sitting on top of it, still burning cheerfully, making happy Ori sounds. The arena went absolutely berserk. An F-rank slime had just defeated an S-rank Frost Titan bear. The ranking system had officially stopped making sense. The final match was exactly what everyone knew it would be. Yoon Seojin and his slime versus Choi Taehyun and his S-rank Flame Lion. The golden boy against the joke. Except nobody was laughing anymore. Taehyun entered the arena looking like he'd swallowed something sour. His Flame Lion prowled beside him, mane blazing, each step scorching the floor. A creature bred from royal bloodlines, enhanced since birth with premium monocrystals. The strongest familiar in the Academy by every metric that existed. Seojin entered holding Ori, now soccer ball-sized and glowing faintly blue. The crowd was split between disbelief and barely contained excitement. Half of them expected Taehyun to crush the slime and restore the natural order. The other half wanted to see the natural order get turned inside out. Taehyun spoke first, loud enough for the crowd. I don't know what tricks you've been feeding that thing, but my lion was born S-rank. and no amount of slime tricks changes the gap between us. Seojin set Ori down gently on the arena floor. Your lion was given S rank, he said. Ori earned every level it has. Let's see which one matters more. The match began and the flame lion attacked immediately. A wall of crimson fire rolled across the arena floor like a tidal wave. The heat was so intense that the barrier runes at the arena's edge flickered. Seojin had prepared for this specific fight for 3 months. He'd studied the flame lion's attack patterns from every recording available. He knew its speed, its power output, its recovery time between fire blasts, and he designed a specific absorption sequence to counter every single one. Ori absorbed Stone Golem Fragment first, becoming dense and heat-resistant. The fire wave hit and Ori barely moved, taking the impact like a boulder in a stream. Then Ori absorbed Kraken Ink, liquefying its body and flooding the arena floor with water. The flame lion's fire met the water, and the arena disappeared behind a wall of steam. Inside the steam, Ori shifted again. Thunderwolf essence coursed through its liquid body. The water on the floor became electrified. The flame lion's paws touched the charged surface, and every muscle in its body seized. 3 seconds of involuntary paralysis, long enough for what came next. Ori reformed, absorbed the dragon heartblood again, and grew. Not to soccer ball size this time. To the size of a person, dense, crackling with stolen lightning, surface hard as iron. The flame lion broke free from the paralysis and roared, shaking the arena. Ori answered with a sound nobody had ever heard from a slime before. Not an Ori, something deeper, something that vibrated in the chest. The collision shook the building to its foundation. Lion and slime locked together in a contest of raw force. Crimson flames against electrified iron, born power against earned power. For 10 full seconds, neither gave ground. Then Seojin played his final card. He pulled out a vial he'd been saving since the day he first discovered Ori's fusion ability. A vial of Basilisk King essence that Yuri had risked her entire career to acquire. Ori, now, Seojin said. The slime opened a gap in its surface and absorbed the essence mid-combat. Triple fusion, iron, lightning, petrification. Ori became a crackling iron sphere that turned everything it touched to stone. It slammed into the flame lion's side and the petrification spread from the point of contact. Stone crawled across the lion's flank, fighting against its fire, winning inch by inch. The lion roared and poured everything into its flames, trying to burn the stone off. But Ori was iron. The fire couldn't melt it, and the lightning kept disrupting the lion's mana flow. And the petrification kept spreading. Taeyun screamed at his lion to break free, voice cracking with something he'd never felt. Desperation. The golden boy who had never lost, facing the possibility for the first time. The flame lion managed one final surge, a blast of crimson fire that blew Ori backward. But the petrification had already reached the lion's hind legs. It collapsed, half stone, half flame, unable to stand. Ori reformed, bounced once, and sat on the arena floor making quiet Ori sounds. The arena was silent for almost 5 seconds. Then it erupted louder than any tournament in the Academy's history. The F-rank slime had defeated the S-rank flame lion. The joke had beaten the golden boy. And the natural order of the entire summoner world had just been flipped upside down. Seojin picked up Ori, who was back to its normal blue translucent form. The little slime nuzzled against his chest and made a contented sound, like it had no idea what it had just done. Or maybe it knew exactly what it had done and just didn't care about the politics. Taeyun stood in the arena, hand on his petrified lion, face blank. Not angry, not humiliated. Something worse. Lost. The look of someone whose entire identity just stopped working. He had been the strongest because his familiar was the strongest. He was born into it, raised into it, told every day that birthright was destiny. And a boy with a slime just proved that none of that mattered. Seojin walked past him and paused. Your lion is strong, he said, without mockery. But you never had to work for it, so you never learned what it could really do. That's not your lion's fault. It was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to Choi Taeyun, and probably the cruelest, because it was true. The aftermath of the tournament sent shockwaves through the entire summoner community. The Academy's ranking system was publicly questioned for the first time in its history. If an F-rank familiar could defeat an S-rank through adaptive evolution, then the initial ranking at summoning was meaningless. It measured starting point, not potential. And nobody had ever considered that a starting point of 0 could lead to infinity. The summoner registry sent officials to evaluate Ori. They ran 17 tests over 3 days. Every test produced a different result because Ori could become a different thing each time. Their conclusion was a masterpiece of bureaucratic confusion. Rank classification, variable, minimum D, maximum unknown, recommend monitoring. Maximum unknown. 2 words that kept the registry officials awake at night. Because unknown meant no ceiling, and no ceiling meant the ranking system itself was fundamentally flawed. Seojin didn't care about the politics. He cared about staged evolution. The system panel told him he needed a rank creature essence for the next permanent upgrade, which meant going somewhere the Academy's training dungeons couldn't take him. The real dungeons, the ones that killed people who weren't ready. Yuri told him he was insane. Then she packed a bag and asked when they were leaving. Because partners don't let partners dive into death dungeons alone. Their first real dungeon was a C-rank rift in the mountain district east of the capital. Officially too dangerous for Academy students. Unofficially, Seojin's familiar had just beaten an S-rank, so the rules felt flexible. Inside, they encountered monsters that the training ground versions were based on. Except the real ones were faster, smarter, and absolutely did not hold back. Ori adapted to every threat with the speed of a creature that had been evolving for months. Iron form for physical attacks, fire form for ice monsters, lightning form for water types. Seojin directed the changes through their bond, calling shifts in real time. And Yuri's healing familiar kept them all alive through the close calls. They cleared the dungeon in 6 hours, which was a record for a 2-person team. At the core, Seojin found the rank essence he needed. A crystal dropped by the dungeon boss, a shadow basilisk king. Ori absorbed it, and the evolution hit like a thunderbolt. Stage to evolution complete, current rank, B. New ability, form memory. Form memory meant Ori could now store previous fusions and recall them instantly. No more needing to carry separate vials of material for each transformation. Once Ori had used a fusion, it was saved permanently in its body's memory. Iron lightning, fire regeneration, water control, stone petrification. All of them available on command, switchable in under a second. Ori had gone from a creature that needed preparation time to a real-time shapeshifter. From B rank, the path to a rank required something called a dimensional core fragment, found only in S-rank dungeons that most professional teams avoided. Seojin spent the next year building his team. Yuri as healer and tactical support. A swordsman named Kang Do-yuk who had been expelled from the academy for fighting back against a noble who was bullying lower-rank students. A tracker named Lee Sora whose familiar was a scent hound rank C. Considered useless in combat but invaluable for dungeon navigation. Each team member was someone the system had undervalued. And each one, like Ori, turned out to be far more capable than their ranking suggested. They cleared B-rank dungeons methodically, building experience and collecting materials. Ori's form library grew with every dungeon. Lava Golem Core gave it a magma form that melted through walls. Crystal Spider Silk gave it a web form that could trap entire rooms. Storm Eagle Essence gave it a lightning flight form faster than any bird. By the time they reached the S-rank dungeon entrance, Ori had over 40 stored forms, and could switch between any of them faster than most summoners could give a single command. The S-rank dungeon nearly killed them. 3 times in the first hour alone. Monsters that could think, plan, and set traps. Environmental hazards that shifted constantly. And a dungeon boss that made every previous challenge look like a warm-up. A Void Serpent, S-rank, capable of erasing matter from existence. It could dissolve anything it touched into nothing, including magical barriers and steel. Ori's iron form was eaten through in seconds. Its stone form lasted slightly longer before crumbling to dust. Every physical form Ori tried, the serpent's void touch dissolved. Seojin's mind raced through 40 stored forms looking for an answer. Then he found it. Not a physical form at all. The healing form, the one Yuri had given Ori with Moonlight Sage all those months ago. Ori shifted to pure healing energy, a form that wasn't physical matter at all. The Void Serpent's touch passed through Ori without effect. You can't dissolve something that isn't made of matter. While the serpent was confused, Ori fused healing energy with lightning, creating a form that could shock without being touched. An energy-based attack that the Void Serpent couldn't eat. The serpent fell after 12 minutes of the most intense combat Seojin had ever experienced. In its remains, the dimensional core fragment pulsed with an otherworldly glow. Ori absorbed it, and the world went white. Stage 3 evolution complete, current rank, A. New ability, independent thought. Seojin felt the bond shift and change. Ori wasn't just responding to commands anymore. It was thinking, anticipating, making tactical decisions on its own. Not replacing Seojin's direction, complementing it, like a partner instead of a tool. And its base size had grown again, now roughly the size of a large dog, with the ability to expand to nearly 3 meters in any combat form. The system panel showed to more evolution stages ahead, both locked behind question marks. Whatever was coming next, Seojin knew one thing for certain. The slime that 100 students laughed at was now stronger than any familiar in the academy. And it was still growing. When Seojin returned to the academy, the reception was very different from his first day. No laughter, no jokes about summoning dinner. Instructors who had told him to sit on the bench now asked him to demonstrate. Students who had mocked him now asked for advice. And Choi Tae-yun, golden boy with his flame lion, approached him with a request. Not a challenge, not a threat, a request. Teach me, Tae-yun said, and the words cost him everything his pride had ever built. Teach me how to actually train my familiar instead of just relying on its rank. Seojin looked at the boy who had called Ori dinner on the first day, and saw, underneath the pride and the privilege, a summoner who genuinely loved his lion, but had never learned how to bring out its full potential, because nobody had ever told him he needed to. When you're born at the top, you never learn to climb. Start by feeding it something it's never tasted, Seojin said. Not to make it stronger, to make it curious. A curious familiar is a growing familiar. Tae-yun nodded once and left without another word. Yuri watched him go and raised an eyebrow at Seojin. You just helped the guy who made fun of Ori for 6 months. Seojin scratched Ori's membrane gently, and the slime made contented sounds. Ori doesn't hold grudges, he said. And I'm trying to be more like Ori. Over the following year, everything Seojin had built continued to expand. His team cleared or ranked dungeons with a consistency that professional guilds envied. Ori's form library exceeded 100 stored transformations. Each new material, each new dungeon, each new monster added another option. The Academy revised its ranking system because of Ori's existence. A new classification was added, growth type, potential rank variable, ensuring that no future familiar would be dismissed based on its starting form. Every slime, every common bug, every decorative fish summoned from this point forward would be evaluated for growth potential before being ranked, because of one boy who refused to abandon his familiar when the world told him it was garbage. The Summoner Registry formally acknowledged Ori as the first documented case of an F-rank familiar achieving a rank through bonded evolution. They created an entire new research category around the phenomenon. Papers were published, conferences were held, theories were debated, and at the center of all of it was a blue translucent blob sitting on a boy's head, going Ori, and not caring about any of it. Seojin graduated at the top of his class, not because the Academy adjusted his grades retroactively, because his dungeon clear rate, combat record, and practical scores were simply the highest. Earned, documented, undeniable. He was offered positions at every major guild, every government agency, every research institute. He turned them all down. Instead, he opened a training center for summoners with low-ranked familiars, a place where F-rank and D-rank summoners could learn what he discovered on his own. That every familiar has hidden potential. That the starting rank is just that, a starting point. And that the bond between summoner and familiar isn't about power. It's about willingness to discover what your partner can become. He called it the Ori Center, because obviously, the sign out front showed a smiling blue slime. Inside, kids who had been told their familiars were worthless learned the same thing Seojin had. That worthless is just a word people use when they've stopped looking. A boy brought in a common garden snail familiar, embarrassed and ready to cry. Seojin fed it a fragment of mithril ore. The snail's shell hardened into an unbreakable metal dome. The boy stopped crying. A girl brought in a firefly familiar, glowing so faintly it was basically invisible. Seojin fed it concentrated solar crystal dust. The firefly became a miniature sun that could blind rank monsters at full power. The girl's jaw hit the floor. Every familiar had something. You just had to find it. And Seojin had turned finding it into an art form. Ori sat on the reception desk of the center, greeting every visitor with happy sounds. Now the size of a large dog in its base form, it could expand to fill a room in combat mode. Over 100 stored forms, each one capable of handling different threats. An independent thought that let it make tactical decisions faster than most human fighters. The F-rank slime was, by every functional measure, one of the strongest familiars alive. Not because it was born strong, because it was willing to absorb anything, try anything, become anything. And because its summoner never, not for one single second, considered giving up on it. That's the real story. Not the tournament wins, not the dungeon clears, not the ranking system reform. A boy who held a trembling slime in a room full of laughter, and chose to protect it instead of being ashamed of it. That choice, made in a moment of humiliation, defined everything that followed. Every late-night training session in the dorm room. Every vial of monster essence smuggled from dungeon cleanup. Every notebook page of documented experiments. Every fusion discovery that pushed the boundaries of what a familiar could be. All of it traced back to one moment. A boy choosing to close his hands gently around something small and scared, instead of being embarrassed by it. Ori was scared that day, trembling in his palms. Seojin was scared too, standing in front of 100 laughing faces. But he didn't show it, because Ori needed him not to. And that instinct, The instinct to protect something weaker than you. To invest in something nobody else sees value in. To work in the dark on a project the world has already dismissed. That instinct is rarer and more valuable than any S-rank familiar. Choi Tae-yun had the strongest creature in the academy. He never had to develop the instinct to work for something. Seojin had the weakest creature in the academy. He developed everything else because he had to. And everything else turned out to be what actually mattered. The patience, the observation, the creativity, the refusal to accept a label. Those weren't slime traits. Those were Seojin traits. Ori became extraordinary because its summoner was extraordinary first. The slime didn't carry the boy. The boy carried the slime. Until the slime was strong enough to carry them both. And by then, they didn't need carrying at all. They just needed each other. A bond that started with a wet hiccup and grew into something the world had never seen. Not because of destiny, not because of birthright, not because of rank. Because a boy looked at a slime and saw a partner instead of a punchline. Every kid who walks into the Ori Center carrying a familiar they're ashamed of gets told the same thing on day one. Your familiar isn't weak, it's undiscovered. And discovering it is the best part. Some of them cry when they hear that, because nobody has ever told them their familiar was worth anything. The same way nobody told Seojin. He had to figure it out alone, in a dorm room, feeding iron to a slime at 2 in the morning. Now he makes sure nobody else has to figure it out alone. That's not a career. That's not a business strategy. That's not a legacy plan. That's just a person who remembers what it felt like to be laughed at, and decides that the best use of his strength is making sure it happens less. The academy sends its lowest strength students to the Ori Center now. Not as punishment, as opportunity. Because 3 graduates from the center have already made a rank with familiars nobody wanted. A mushroom familiar that became a biological weapon platform. A river crab familiar that evolved into an armored siege beast. And a common house spider whose web could trap S-rank monsters. Every one of them was called trash on summoning day. Every one of them walked into the Ori Center thinking their career was over. And walked out knowing it had just begun. Ori sits on the reception desk, bigger now, wiser, radiating a gentle warmth. It still makes Ori sounds when it's happy. It still nuzzles against Seojin's palm when he scratches its membrane. It still bounces when it's excited and jiggles when it laughs. 100 combat forms stored inside, power enough to challenge the strongest familiars alive. And underneath all that evolution, underneath all the iron and lightning and fire and stone, still the same little blue blob that trembled in a boy's hands on the worst day of its life. And found in those hands the one person who would never let go. They laughed for 3 minutes straight when Ori appeared in the summoning circle. They stopped laughing when Ori defeated an S-rank flame lion in the tournament. They stopped ranking when the system Ori proved broken got reformed. And they stopped underestimating when the F-rank slime became an A-rank legend. But Seojin doesn't measure Ori by rank. He never did. He measures Ori by the happy sound it makes when it sees him in the morning. By the way it nuzzles sleeping students who fall asleep at their desks. By the gentle healing pulse it sends through the building when someone is hurt. By the fact that it still, after everything, fits perfectly in his hands. Larger now, heavier, crackling with stored power. But still his. Still the first thing he chose to protect when the world gave him nothing. And still the best decision he ever made. Every summoner in the academy got something powerful. Seojin got something better. He got a partner that grew because he believed in it. And in believing in it, he became someone worth believing in too. Ori. The sound of a slime that was told it was nothing, and became everything. Because one person heard that sound and thought it was worth protecting. The evening sun hits the Ori Center's windows and paints the reception desk gold. Ori catches the light and refracts it into tiny rainbows across the walls. A new student walks in holding a caterpillar familiar, face red with embarrassment. Seojin looks at the caterpillar and smiles. Because he already knows what nobody else in the room can see yet. That the most incredible transformations always start with the smallest beginnings. A caterpillar today, a legend tomorrow, a slime yesterday, and a rank today. An F-rank summoner once, the person who changed the entire ranking system forever. All because he refused to laugh when the world told him his partner was a joke. Seojin reaches out his hand and the caterpillar crawls onto his finger. He looks at the nervous student and says the same words he says to every new arrival. Welcome to the Ori Center. Your familiar isn't weak. It's undiscovered. And we're going to discover it together. The student's eyes fill with something that looks a lot like hope. The same hope Seojin felt the first time Ori turned to iron in his dorm room. The same hope that carried him through months of secret training and dungeon cleanup shifts. The same hope that said this isn't the end, this is where it starts. Ori bounces off the desk and lands on the student's shoulder. The caterpillar and the slime look at each other. The caterpillar wiggles. Ori makes a welcoming Ori sound. And somewhere in that tiny moment between two small creatures meeting for the first time is the same magic that started everything. Not elemental magic, not combat magic, not any kind of power the Academy measures. The magic of someone deciding that the small thing in front of them matters. That's the magic Seojin discovered in a summoning hall full of laughter. And it's the magic he teaches every day to every kid who walks through his door, carrying a familiar the world calls useless, and learning, for the first time, that useless is just a word that hasn't met the right person yet. Seojin was the right person for Ori. Now he helps other people become the right person for their familiar. One small, scared, underestimated creature at a time. That's not a superpower. That's patience, care, and the stubborn refusal to give up on something small. Which, when you think about it, is the only superpower that actually changes anything. The big powers destroy. The small ones transform. An S-rank flame lion can burn down a building. A slime that learned to become anything can rebuild it. Seojin chose the slime, and the slime chose to become everything. Not because it was destined to. Because someone fed it iron at 2 in the morning and whispered you're not useless. And meant it. The evening deepens over the Ori Center. Students file out, each one carrying a familiar that walks a little taller than when it arrived. A snail with a mithril shell, a firefly bright as a star, a caterpillar that hasn't transformed yet. But will. They all will. Because someone showed them it was possible. And that someone is sitting on the front steps with a slime on his head, watching the sun go down over a city that used to call him a joke, and doesn't anymore. Not because he proved them wrong with force. Because he proved them wrong with patience. And a slime named Ori who never stopped saying Ori Ori. Even when nobody was listening. Especially when nobody was listening. Because that's when it mattered most. A small voice in a loud room saying I'm here. I matter. Watch what I can become. They laughed for 3 minutes on summoning day. Ori has been answering that laughter every day since. With iron and fire and lightning and stone and flight and healing in 100 other forms. Each one earned, each one discovered, each one proof that the laughter was wrong. And the boy who held a trembling slime in his hands and chose to protect it was right about everything. The familiar that nobody wanted became the strongest in the academy. The summoner that everybody mocked became the one who changed the system. The center that started with one boy and one slime now trains hundreds. And the ranking that used to define everything now has a new category at the bottom. Growth type, potential unknown. 2 words that mean exactly what Seojin has been proving since day one. That the things we dismiss might be the things that matter most. If someone would just bother to look. Seojin looked, and found Ori. And Ori found everything else. One absorbed material at a time. One evolution at a time. One Ori at a time. The slime sits on his head as the last light fades. Warm, content, full of 100 forms and infinite potential. Still blue, still translucent, still making that same soft sound. The sound that a room full of people laughed at, and that one person heard as the beginning of everything. Ori Ori. The smallest voice. The biggest story. A slime that became a legend. A boy that became a teacher. A joke that became proof. That nothing is worthless. Nothing is hopeless. Nothing is beyond saving. If someone is willing to hold it in their hands, and say you matter, and mean it, every single day, until the world has no choice but to agree. Ori Ori. That's the whole story, and the slime is still growing.